Hi, this is Marco Pimentel. Welcome to the podcast, Someone Like You. In this first season, you'll discover founders, creators, entrepreneurs, and business owners who are passionate about creating business models with lasting, sustainable climate solutions.
Clothing, in a lot of people's minds, has become something that's disposable, and we want to shift it into something that's more of an investment, something that they take some time to think about the purchase and hang on to that product, keep it in their wardrobe for a long time. Right now, about 3/5 of what's being purchased is leaving someone's wardrobe within a year.
Fashion. While the fashion industry is booming, fashion production makes up 10% of humanity's carbon emissions. It dries up our water sources and it pollutes rivers and streams. What's more, 85% of all textiles go to the dump each year, and washing some types of clothes sends a significant amount of microplastics into the ocean. Today's guest is a lot different than most of the fashion brands that you see. Unlike most clothing brands, our guest today actually makes their clothing. In addition, they focus on responsibly sourced materials, circular commerce. You can buy and sell their clothing used on their platform, and they just finalized an acquisition of a company that reworks used clothing, again, in their own factory. Joining me on today's episode is René Gauthier, founder of sustainable fashion lifestyle brand Ecologyst. René knew he wanted to change the system, but turning away from the successful business he had already built, whose manufacturing and supply chain relied on traditional models, was no easy feat. It meant completely reshaping how the company did business. At Ecologyst, René and his team are committed to a greener future where we buy less, buy better, and build a lasting relationship with our clothing. All of Ecologyst's apparel is made in Canada and in the US, which supports local jobs and building the highest quality product made of all natural biodegradable materials like organic cotton and merino wool. Carbon offset, future focused, and wearable, Ecologyst's goal is nothing less than the death of fast fashion and a fundamental shift in how we wear, care, and love our clothing. I hope you enjoy our conversation. René, welcome to the show.
Hi, Marco. Thanks for having me.
You are the founder at Ecologyst, so I know it's been founded and co-founded in 2004, but we'll get to that story. Has entrepreneurship kind of always been in your blood and fascinated you, or how did you get into founding the business?
Maybe I didn't realize it was always in my blood, but now I think when I reflect back on it, that was there. I was definitely the person in, whether it was like team sports when younger, or even when I was putting myself through school by tree planting. I was always looking at ways I could get involved on the business side of things, pulling together the group for creating t-shirt designs for the team and how we might sell those to other people. So I think there was always a spark in that realm from a pretty early age. I did while in university, also after hanging out in the engineering department for several years and doing co-ops and such. Realized I didn't want to be a cog in the engineering world, but sort of found myself drawn to some of the entrepreneurs of the businesses that I did co-ops for, and hung out a little more with them than kind of my peers at the more grunt work level, and decided after 3 years of engineering that I would make a switch into entrepreneurship while in school. So it took me a little bit to realize that spark was there, but once I did, the slipper fit, so to speak.
And that spark led you to co-found Sitka in 2004, which we're both actually on the west coast of Canada in Victoria. So I know that brand. It was a lifestyle brand that sold clothing and surfboards, really with kind of a West Coast, Pacific Northwest aesthetic. But the brand became Ecologyst in 2019. So what was the reasoning for that brand transition, and what was the focus of that change?
I mean, I think the change really started probably more around 2014, and then the change in name in 2019, I sort of see as the cherry on top of that transition. But Sitka, the brand, starting in, well, as far as the government's concerned, started in 2004, but we really started it in 2002, still while in university, and wanted to create a clothing brand, not dissimilar from, at the time there was brands like Quicksilver and Volcom, Patagonia was around then too, that we looked up to, but we wanted to make a more Pacific Northwest version of that. So, swapping out the palm trees on the t-shirts and putting the Sitka tree on there. But other than the design and some other parts to the business, the how we made the products was pretty much identical to how those brands did and still do make their goods. Using a global supply chain model, having products kind of made all over the world, basically seeking out who can do it the cheapest for you, and using a lot of synthetic fibers, so polyester, nylons, acrylics, so forth, which these days makes up over 60% of what people are wearing. So fibers coming from the petrochemical industry, and that was how we did things. And I guess after about 15 years or so, maybe a little less, of operating that way, kind of got to a place where could no longer turn a blind eye to some of the nasty business that is the clothing industry, and really set out to find a different way of making products, and one that aligned with my values, but also those of the other kind of amazing people we've been able to attract to work with our company. And that type of change doesn't happen overnight. Like we decided we would move our production as close as possible to where we were selling the goods. So basically moving our production back to North America. We would stop using petrochemical fibers for our products, so only using natural fibers, and several other changes. But most of the clothing industry has gone overseas, over the last 50 years here. So it's not an easy thing to just overnight change. So that took several years to build the supply chain that we now have in place with Ecologyst. And it even included starting up our own factory, because there was certain products we could no longer make once we moved our production back here, and that pushed us to open up our own facility so that we could actually make those products. But I guess to like kind of come back to the part about Sitka to Ecologyst, in 2018, we got a letter from Gore-Tex, which is a huge textile company out of the US, and they have a hunting company called Sitka. And because our online business had been ramping up and into the US as well, they wanted us to change our name. And we'd actually already been considering a name change, just because we changed so much about how we do things that as Sitka, that it just kind of made sense. Didn't see the point in fighting them on it, especially for something we were already thinking about doing. So there it is.
Yeah, and the irony is obviously Gore-Tex being a materials and a fabric company that probably is supporting a lot of that petro industry as well to get their materials, as I'm guessing. So
100%.
and so the interesting thing is understanding Sitka from 2002. You were doing the same things that the industry, I guess, was doing. And were you doing that because that was the only way to compete? Was it the only way to run the business? Was the only really options? Like why did you feel that you did that? And I guess why did you start to realize that things need to change?
Mm. Yeah, I think at the time we just didn't know any better. We were like, oh, this is how everybody makes clothing, and and really today, like it's still the lion's share of products is made how we used to do it under Sitka. And you're 20 years old and you're fresh out of university, and you're just like, we want to make this cool Pacific Northwest brand. That was the focus. But things change as you grow up and you start noticing some things, and your values evolve, and you want to make sure you're getting out of bed every day for a worthy cause. You want to make sure you can look your son in the eye and know that you're doing everything you can to make sure that he and his pals, and they've got a planet long after you're gone. So I don't know, a lot of different reasons. I personally had a bit of a wake up call. Like I think some people will go and do 10-day meditations, or take psychedelic drugs. And I was in 2013 sort of fortunate enough to be in a near death motorcycle accident. And on the other side of that, there was a lot that became very crystal clear. And one of those was that I'd been turning a blind eye a bit to some things that just totally weren't aligned with kind of who I am as a human. So it was nice to get that wake up call at that point in time.
Sounds like a tough lesson. And so when, the mission, you're talking about all these changes and working on this over a longer period of time. And the Ecologist has, 4 kind of principles around, intentional clothing, made here, nature, and then just repairing these things. So from my understanding is it's we've had other clothing companies on the show before. The fashion industry is especially the fast fashion industry is really, really harmful to an environment, and consumers are also to blame for consuming all of this as well. But to change this system and to be a brand like yours and to do that, what did that mean in terms of either sacrifice for the businesses? What were the hard things you had to do, and what did it typically mean for education and for the consumer on that side?
Yeah, there's a few questions. I feel like, and lots of stories within there. Yeah, it wasn't easy. Making the shift that we did. There's a lot of cutting of teeth. We quite like nearly went out of business, like in the process of making this transition that we're talking about. I think it's more recently too that we're realizing that although like we have amazing products and designs, and like of course those are assets, but perhaps our biggest asset is that we are a company that's actually made that transition, and that's something that we're now able to share with others, because there's to my knowledge, I don't know any other company that's done that, that has onshore their goods at the like, and completely redone their supply chain as we have. So we've got companies reaching out to us to help them with that now, and sort of that's where we're seeing like our own growth, less in growing our brand, but helping others to achieve it as well. And the infrastructure at the moment, it's really not in place, especially for some of the larger brands to even make that shift. So that's something we're really focused on building that infrastructure within North America to allow the tens of thousands of brands to help make that transition. And we got to this place like quite quickly too. If you rewind to say like 1965, somewhere around there, um, it's 98% of the clothing that was sold in North America was made in North America, and now we're about 2%. And then similar with us wearing the plastic clothing, like that only came around after 1950. So humans have been wearing clothing for a long time, and we did just fine without the plastic versions of it for many years. So we see that we can swing the pendulum and sort of view the pendulum coming back as inevitable, but we want to help give it a bigger push if we can.
So it sounds like the industry itself in North America is not there to bring that back here, or at least not yet.
Yeah, not yet at the scale that it needs to. That's for sure. Yeah.
And can you just touch on when we're talking about ecology, we're talking about you know making clothing here and only 2% being here. Maybe just for to understand that transition that you made and the things that you're doing to make this a sustainable business. Like how many pieces of your business have you had to touch and change, and what do you do to from manufacturing? Is it all 100% made here? How what are the factors that you're doing to ensure that?
Yeah. Um, well, we measure. We measure a lot of things. We measure distance traveled to like make our product. We measure carbon footprint. We measure plastics avoided. So we're keeping score on our choices of how we make things, and then starting with the low hanging fruit, and then we've just been kind of working through the list. Just constantly, like it just feels like it's a never ending game, and one that we really enjoy. But yeah, I guess if you're looking for some examples, we make about 30% of our goods in our own facility here in Victoria. We've been like moving that percentage up. Um, those goods travel 0 kilometers to get to the distribution center, which is in the exact same space, which is is very dissimilar from like the current model. Um, our materials, same sort of thing. I mean, we aren't a fabric mill, so but we're getting our fabrics as close as possible to our factory as we can. So for example, I mean, I'd take maybe a wool shirt as example. One of our wool shirts, the sheep are in Montana. The fabric mill is in Connecticut, and it's one of only 3 remaining in North America that can make this fabric. And then it's shipped to us here, it's cut, sewn, 0 kilometers to the distribution center, which I said. And that's very different than maybe the 50,000 plus kilometers that a shirt may travel. Those sheep might be in New Zealand, and then it's sent to let's say China to be turned into a fabric, but will bounce around that country to the various stages of making that fabric, and then cut and sewn over there, then shipped to a distribution center, and then fired off to the various stores from there. There's a lot of waste, put it that way, in our industry. I also I think something that a lot of people don't realize in the clothing industry, every single garment is put in a plastic bag, and then those get put in a box, and inside that box there's like another plastic bag for all of those individually wrapped garments, and then that box is sealed up, and then it's put on a crate, and then it goes into a container, and then it's shipped over here to North America. Whether it's like Patagonia or the Gap, like that's how they all do it. Part of that is they don't want the product to get ruined on the way over, because if a little bit of water gets in there, even from the humidity, like crossing over in the ocean, then you end up getting a moldy situation on the product. But most companies have not found a better way of doing that yet, which is really unfortunate. But we don't do that. We just put it in the box and ship it.
Every week on Someone Like You, we dive into stimulating conversations with founders, entrepreneurs, business owners, and the likes who are consciously and successfully creating sustainable business solutions for the long haul. Tune in every week for a new inspiring conversation on leading climate solutions. And if you're enjoying the podcast, don't forget, please subscribe on the platform of your choice and give us a rating and a review. When we think about these examples and how has this led to your business in terms of growth? Like, how have the consumers reacted, purchased, or referred?
Yeah.
Like, how has that side? How has the brand reacted to these changes, and the consumers reacted to it?
We attract an interesting group of people. And the kind of the common value, like across our customers, is a distrust for brands, a distrust for corporations, companies, so forth. Like that's the number one like commonality amongst our customer base. We got the skeptics. Those are the people that buy from us. There's a lot of greenwashing in our industry. I think people are kind of becoming more familiar with that. When the H&Ms of the world are saying we're sustainable, you know that, well, not everybody knows, but I think a lot of people are starting to call bullshit on that. And so we get a lot of the people that like asking the tough questions and kind of going deep, and we welcome that. People that are gonna challenge us. So for those individuals, we're a good fit. For people that are still used to buying a T-shirt for $15 and that feel comfortable doing so, we aren't a fit for them today. But we're excited to play a role in helping to educate them and others on the true cost, and just how much love and craft and skill and time goes into making clothing products. We really want to like shift people's perception from clothing in a lot of people's minds has become as something that's disposable, and we want to shift it into something that's more of an investment, something that they take some time to think about the purchase, and hang on to that product, keep it in their wardrobe for a long time. Right now, about 3/5 of what's being purchased is leaving someone's wardrobe within a year. So we really want to shift that way of thinking of clothing.
Because that is the elephant, I guess, in the room when we think about things like what you're doing, bringing it to North America, only 2% of companies, and then doing everything that you're doing is that things cost more money, and people bring that up that it's unaffordable, it's unattainable for everybody. But it is
Yeah,
a change in consumer habit as well, where uh, do you need 10 sweaters that are cheap, that you never wear, that you wear very unoften? So it has to be the both sides. But is that how you address it? Is that this is ultimately the true cost, and that I guess, how do you get the people that do buy those, the Aritzias of the world? How do you get them, I guess, on board?
yeah, I think that that is in part how we address it. We talk about cost per wear, and owning fewer better, and that at least over a longer period of time, you will actually spend less on your wardrobe, if you shift your buying, to what we're talking about here. And we also, though, are looking for ways to keep that price point down. We not that long ago acquired a upcycling factory that's based in Vancouver, and they specialize in taking end of life pieces of clothing, and using that as the raw materials. So in doing so, the raw material cost is very close to zero, and actually in some cases it's zero, which allows us to kind of offer a more accessible price point for made in Canada quality goods, just because we're taking out that raw material part of the cost of goods sold.
And that was an acquisition that you guys recently made, called Frankie Collective. Is that part of your kind of vision to get more and more consumers, reusing clothing, the full life cycle, I guess, of clothing, and focusing more on the circular economy?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, a big driver for us when we hear from our customers, and we do interviews with them, what was coming up time and time again was that if if they bought new, they would buy from us. But their first choice was always to buy a used garment, and it's impossible to compete on a sustainability level with a used garment. That was sort of the seed to start looking at how we might participate in the resale, in the upcycling, the circularity side to our industry, which is quite nascent right now. What we do at the Frankie factory, what we call rework, that is a very new way of making clothing, or at least making it at scale. There's been people doing that from their homes for like thousands of years, or you could go on to Etsy and find lots of reworkers, but nobody doing it yet at the scale that we're doing it. Yeah.
And are all the pieces unique, or are you able to do specific runs of certain types of clothing, just based on sorting and reusing goods?
Yeah. So um, what what we look for is products that, like, from the rag houses, or clothing products that no longer have value as a vintage piece, so they can't be resold. So often what that means is it's a product that's coming from a brand that over the past however many years has made, tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of that same product. So we can find a lot of them in the rag houses. I'll use an example like Adidas has been making track pants with those three stripes down the leg for ages. Like there's millions of those out there. And this is where we are able to find some economies of scale because we can get quite a few of those, and then we can make the exact same new garment from those instead of it being a one of one. There'll be, because different garments will be more worn down or less or so forth. So, there'll be some slight variation, or that red color was a little darker one year than the next. So there's some slight variation, but for the most part, it ends up looking the same. I think something that a lot of people don't realize is that in our industry right now, like when I say it's wasteful, like about 30% of what's made every year, which we've now gone past 100 billion new garments made every year as an industry. So of that 100 billion, 30% goes unsold. And as you move sort of further upscale in the clothing industry and you get into the luxury brands, that percentage goes up. So, when you're looking at the Hermes and the Gucci's and so forth, that number is closer to about 50% of what they're making every year is going unsold. They don't have the, or at least in their minds, they don't have the option to discount the product. That would tarnish the brand too much. So generally, that product is incinerated, sometimes landfilled, and really we see huge opportunity in making that our feedstock, our raw material.
And then, you mentioned too that out of the, I guess the 70 billion that are purchased out of the 100 billion, a lot of that 70 billion are rarely worn and often discarded within the first year, meaning, likely 50%, almost 50 billion of these pieces are probably being either donated or something or thrown out within a year.
Yeah, you got it. It's staggering numbers.
They are staggering. And when you think about that, and obviously you're thinking about what you're doing and the impact that you're doing, and I love your earlier statement about helping other companies realize like this is a transition, you've made it. But like, how hopeful are you that this industry does change? Like I believe that they have to, and they're going to be held responsible. But there's also new brands. There's new brands that are coming up that are incredibly fast fashion, that are incredibly wasteful, and that these are new brands that are coming up, today. And so it's a little bit disheartening to hear that. So how do you feel about that transition?
Yeah, I mean, I am hopeful. I feel like I'm hopeful by nature. So, but I think we're seeing the change. I think the fact that H&M is doing like sustainability campaigns, like it shows that the demand is there for this shift. Unfortunately, like the infrastructure isn't yet there in place to like authentically enable it. But to me, that's like, I don't know, that's exciting. Like let's build that. That's huge, like growth opportunity for those that participate in being the ones that do build that. But I also think that there's some social pressure coming. Like we've seen, I don't know, I think back like 30 years ago, smoking. Smoking was fine. It like happened everywhere. Like you go into a restaurant, people were smoking, so forth. Like now there's like a bit of shame attached to it. The culture shifted there. Littering, like it used to be totally fine. You could just throw your stuff out the window. Like people didn't even think twice about that. And I think that that shame factor will play a role also um, in the way people are shopping for clothing. And Zara, H&M, Sheen, wherever it is, that's not going to be something you're proud of in the future. Is sort of how I see where things are going.
So, with everything that you've built and everything that you've done to transition the business, you've acquired Frankie. What's next?
Yeah, yeah. I think I was touching on this earlier, but where we see growing the business is really in helping to build the infrastructure to allow our industry, allow the brands to transition to a better way of doing things. So we're working on acquiring manufacturers, existing manufacturers in North America, and then retrofitting those businesses to bring them up to our standards of both sustainability and ethics, and getting that manufacturing capacity to a scale that allows us to take orders from some of the larger brands so that they can make the change that when you get into the middle management of these companies, they really want to make that shift, but the capacity just isn't there for them to do that. So we want to play a role in building that so that it's not just Ecologyst and some other small brands doing this. We actually can bring the whole industry with us.
And with all this change and all this effort to make these changes that you have and this big transition, and how have you funded all of this? Has this been all through, just sales and or through some funding different mechanisms? How have you been able to fund this? And you funded an acquisition as well. So how have you been able to do that?
I mean, I've been very fortunate to meet some really great humans that like what we're doing and want to support it, want to be a part of it, want to invest into it. Eventually want to see the fruits of that investment as well. They sort of see the world going in a similar direction that we do. And so, yeah, we've been able to bring in some investment to help fund some of our growth and some of our kind of crazy ideas and ways of looking at the world. Included in there, we've been able to make it possible for not just accredited investors, but also non-accredited investors. So, been able to make it possible for a lot of our customers to become investors in the business as well, even if they aren't falling into that accredited investor bucket.
And you, with all this change, again, you're making a majority of your clothing, you're reducing plastic because obviously microplastics is a rampant issue. All the things that you're doing, you still also have time to make sure that you lead in social activism. And so you've created Ecologyst Films. What was the kind of drive to do that as well?
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes from a lot of the people we attract to the business, and sometimes the passions that we have here on the team, they can't all get funneled into the clothing work that we do. So we wanted to have another sort of outlet to allow some of those passions to be nurtured. And I also think it's a way to get our message and our companies out there. A friend of mine used a good analogy when he was describing the films side to our business, and he said, remember when that vegan documentary came out and everyone started switching up their diets? It's sort of like that. We understand we need to participate in the kind of the education side of things and the culture shift here. So we see films as like a really great medium to tell stories and to help play a part in shifting that culture.
Media is powerful, and especially the fact that
Yeah.
Coming from Ecologyst and what you stand for on the business side, I think it adds to the credibility of what you're doing on the film side. So we are near the end of our time, and just wanted to ask, as we wind down, I'm a huge fan of the book, The Lorax. The book is simply about overusing our resources and how a child with a seed can change that outcome. And a lot of people, that when we talk about, climate change or sustainability, they just ask, like, what can they do? And obviously, talking to you, you've shown what people can do, in what you've done within a traditional, what you say is a traditional clothing company, and transformed it and fully transitioned it, is pretty remarkable. So, when people or businesses or individuals think about what can they do, what would you say would be kind of the important first steps to think about?
Yeah, geez, I can give so many. I mean, buy less clothing. I'm going to keep these all clothing related. Buy fewer better clothing items. Look at the content tag. So try to buy natural, if possible. And ideally that's 100% of a particular fiber, because it makes it really hard to recycle the fabric if it's a blend. Um, and then also go through your closet right now, and there's probably quite a bit in there that you're not wearing. So get that back into circulation. Get that into the vintage stores if you can. Yeah, I think there's 3 steps to take right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and everybody should look to transition their business in the same way that you did. And unfortunately, it took a pretty nasty accident for you to have that kind of awakening to do it. But I'm glad you're doing that, and everything that you're building. So, how can people find you or find Ecologyst and learn more?
Well, they could find me right now in a fitting room because it's padded with felt and worked well for this podcast. I'm generally in our factory here in Victoria, which is at 2110 Store Street. At least Monday to Friday, we allow the public to come in. There's a bit of a shoppable showroom, but for the most part, when people come visit, they've never seen clothing being made before, and that's something that we'd like people to get to experience, that to see it firsthand. So you're welcome to come say hi here if you're in the area, and if you're not, you can find us at ecologyst.com.
Thank you, Renee, for joining us today, and congratulations on everything that you've built so far and all of the ambitions that you have moving forward. It's amazing to talk to a change maker like yourself.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much, Marco, and yeah, thanks to everybody that listened all the way through on this one.
Thank you, Renee. This podcast is co-produced with The Brand is Female. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode of Someone Like You. And if you did, please share this. We're a new podcast, and I would love it if you could share it with a family member, friend, colleague, work colleague. Share it on Slack, whoever you do. Just share and spread the message of these incredible brands. Please also support these type of companies. They're doing the hard thing, and the hard thing often takes a lot of people to get on board. And don't forget, please subscribe on the platform of your choice and give us a rating and review. I'm Marco Pimentel. Thank you for joining us today. For more information on Someone Like You, you can find us on Instagram at Someone Like You Podcast, with all the links to the podcast, our website, and more information about the brands that we feature. Thank you again.